This is part 4 of Federalist number 25. So Hamilton says we have to have a small professional army. Don't worry because people are complaining because they want only militia to be used as military. But he has been saying in this paper that circumstances arise. There are insurrections, uprisings, and also foreign countries invade. And as we have seen in Pennsylvania and Massachusetts, even our own constituent, even our own people have risen up and created problems for the governments of those states. You can imagine what would happen if a foreign country invades and if we don't have a good professional military. And then the last paragraph, it was a fundamental maxim of the Lacedaemonian Commonwealth that the post of admiral should not be conferred twice on the same person. The Peloponnesian Confederates, having suffered a severe defeat at sea from the Athenians, demanded Lysander, who had before served with success in that capacity, to command the combined fleets. The Lacedaemonians, to gratify their allies and yet preserve the semblance of an adherence to their ancient institutions, had recourse to the flimsy subterfuge of investing Lysander with the real power of admiral under the nominal title of vice admiral. This instance is selected from among a multitude that might be cited to confirm the truth already advanced and illustrated by domestic examples, which is that nations pay little regard to rules and maxims calculated in their very nature to run counter to the necessities of society. Wise politicians will be cautious about fettering the government with restrictions that cannot be observed because they know that every branch of the fundamental laws, though dictated by necessity, impairs that sacred reverence, which ought to be maintained in the breast of rulers towards the constitution of a country, and from a precedent for other breaches where the same plea of necessity does not exist at all or is less urgent and palpable. In the last paragraph, remember we said that if people are put in a position that they need to defend themselves, they are not going to follow every bit of every line on the Constitution, and the Constitution becomes just a parchment barrier, just a piece of paper if their life is in danger and the government cannot defend them. That's why we need a good military in case people need to be defended. So this is from the last paragraph. But here he talks about the two groups that brought about the Peloponnesian Wars. These were led by Athenians on one side. They had a strong navy. And then he calls it the Peloponnesian Confederacy. And those are the people that were led by Spartans. He said when this war kicked off, they needed a good admiral, and in their laws, in their books, there was a law that said a person cannot serve as an admiral back to back, cannot serve more than 1 year, and cannot serve back to back. But because the Peloponnesians were desperate, they went ahead and gave Lysander the title of vice admiral. However, he was the one who was calling the shots. He was the admiral. So he says, when you make the national defense of the country weak, then what happens is that to save yourself, to secure yourself, sometimes you have to start violating your laws. And he says this is an awful thing to do, because once you start violating your basic law, your constitution, then it gradually loses its reverence and importance. That's why he says it is better to give the government enough power, enough authority to do what it needs to do in times of emergency, rather than give it less power and force it to break the law or violate the Constitution just to save and keep you safe and secure. Because he says once a government or people in government get used to violating the Constitution, violating the basic fundamental law, then the Constitution becomes worthless and society will not have a good future. So keep that in mind. And the reason he brings the Peloponnesian War as an example in this last paragraph, we've talked about it. Peloponnesian War took almost 30 years and brought the Greek civilization down all the way, destroyed the Greek civilization because of that constant long war. They became so weak that Philip of Macedon could easily come and invade them and rule over them. And then eventually the Romans came and ruled over them. So he's saying if we Americans insist on not uniting, staying weak, the same thing is going to happen to us.